In an unexpected and desolate setting, 7 individuals awaken in an unknown environment, an island shrouded in mystery, surrounded by the vast and silent sea, where an abandoned house stands solitary. They have no memory of how they ended up there, nor do they know each other's identities. The situation becomes more unsettling when they realize that something invisible connects them, compelling them to engage in a sinister survival game to unravel the bonds that tie them together in this enigma. As the sun rises, revealing the isolated setting, these 7 souls find themselves inside the house, gradually waking up. One by one, they begin to free themselves from the restraints binding their limbs, helping each other despite the initial fear and distrust. The atmosphere is tense, and cautious conversations begin to emerge as they try to understand the labyrinth they have been thrown into. Among them stands Simon, a police inspector with a leadership spirit, who encourages them to identify themselves and share their stories. Hesitant, the others follow his lead, hoping to find some clue that explains why they are together in this bizarre and isolated situation. Jose, a gentleman with a kind expression, and Isa, a flight attendant whose last memory was being at the airport, are the first to recount their kidnapping experiences. With them, a family consisting of Esteban, a successful businessman, his wife Martha, and the young Lupe, hypothesize about a ransom kidnapping due to Esteban's accumulated fortune. Dr. Armando, a calm and reflective physician, describes how he was abducted directly from his hospital by a mysterious captor. The diversity of the group further confuses Inspector Simon, who questions how, out of all the people in the world, they ended up together. Just as they begin to theorize about their connections, a built-in speaker breaks the silence with a sharp buzz, and a cold, impersonal voice echoes through the walls announcing, "Welcome, competitors. You have been chosen for a singular purpose that you will need to unravel on your own. To survive, you must follow 3 rules in this game. First rule, choose among yourselves who will be the first to die. You will vote. Second rule, no one can volunteer. It must be a choice of the others. Third rule, the chosen one must accept their fate. The revelation leaves everyone in shock, overwhelmed by a cold terror, unsure if the captors will actually carry out the deadly threat or if it's just a cruel psychological manipulation. They have only 60 minutes to make a crucial decision. Otherwise, everyone's lives will be brutally taken. Overcome by fear, their discussions intensify. The group reaches a consensus that Jose, the eldest, should be the one sacrificed. According to his doctor, Jose's time was already running out. The choice, though devastating, is based on the logic that the younger ones have more of life ahead of them. Jose, on the other hand, should give up his life for the survival of the others. However, Lupe opposes this, arguing that every life is equally precious and that no one should be condemned to death. Despite Lupe's protests, Jose makes his final choice. With a resigned expression, he steps forward, accepting his tragic fate. He reveals to the group that his life has been marked by adversities and failures, and that perhaps this final act is his chance for redemption. As Jose utters his last words, a door suddenly opens and a shooter appears. In a swift and cruel act, Jose is executed in front of the terrified eyes of the others. They recognize in the shooter and his partner the same individuals who had kidnapped them, confirming the sinister gravity of their situation. With Jose's death, they hope the nightmare is over, but the relief is short-lived. A new message echoes through the room, revealing that Jose violated the second rule. No one should volunteer or sacrifice themselves. The clock is restarted, and a door ajar leads them to the next stage of torment. The 6 survivors cross the door and enter a dark room, where they find a table covered with envelopes. The doctor, visibly nervous, takes the lead and explains that each envelope contains intimate questions about their personal lives. Compelled by fear, they begin to open the envelopes and answer the proposed questions. As each person reveals their answers, something unusual catches their attention. The first letter of each answer starts to stand out, gradually forming the name Pablo Vega. When Simon, the group's detective, encounters the name, his expression changes drastically. He confesses to the others that Pablo Vega is a notorious criminal, known for pursuing corrupt officials, and has been his target in frustrating investigations for years. It becomes clear that Pablo is the mastermind behind his kidnapping. The tension escalates even further when the doctor, in a sudden panic attack, begins to lose control. He screams desperately, vehemently insisting that the tragedy that led to Pablo's mother's death in the hospital was not his fault. He claimed he did everything in his power to save her. The doctor's unexpected outburst leaves everyone stunned, provoking a clamoring for explanations. He finally reveals that years ago, a woman named Patricia Vega, Pablo's mother, was rushed to the hospital where he worked after being victimized by a terrible car accident. The driver, after hitting her, fled the scene, leaving her in critical condition. Despite all efforts, Patricia did not survive. The doctor suspected that Pablo held him responsible for his mother's death, and driven by a desire for revenge, had orchestrated this entire macabre plan. At this moment, Teresa, one of those present, breaks the silence with a shocking confession. She reveals that she was the one who accidentally ran over Pablo's mother. In panic, Teresa fled the accident scene, only returning later to find it was too late and that Pablo's mother had passed away. Consumed by rage, the doctor confronts Teresa, accusing her of being the true culprit of the accident and of all the tragic events that followed. He holds her entirely responsible for their current situation. However, the tense atmosphere is abruptly interrupted by a voice echoing through the speakers. It is a recording from the nurse who accompanied the doctor on the day of the accident. The nurse uncovers a shocking truth. At the time of the accident, Pablo's mother only suffered a leg fracture, a fully treatable condition. However, due to the doctor's state of intoxication, a serious mistake occurred during the surgery, resulting in a fatal erroneous cut. To cover up his mistake, the doctor lied to the young Pablo, claiming that nothing more could have been done to save his mother. The group reacts with horror to the revelation. Feeling betrayed and outraged, everyone turns against the doctor, placing all the blame on him and proposing a grim vote to decide his fate. However, Inspector Simon promptly intervenes, suggesting that if the blame lay solely with the doctor, the others wouldn't be involved. Simon postulates that each person present must have had some connection with Pablo, even if they are unaware of the details. Simon himself reveals his involvement in the case, admitting that he was investigating Pablo with the intention of arresting him. Teresa now realizes her connection to the events, as does the doctor, but the mystery of the other three's presence remains. Intrigued, Inspector Simon begins to question the other members of the group to clarify their connections to Pablo. Esteban admits to having had several illicit relationships over the years, but denies any knowledge of Pablo. Marta, on the other hand, seems to recognize Pablo in some way. Before she can elaborate on her story, another door opens. Driven by curiosity and the need to discover more, they proceed to the next room, which is adorned with a series of paintings depicting Pablo's life, from childhood to adulthood. As they examined the paintings, Esteban saw the perfect moment, and with a cautious whisper, mentioned that it was essential to keep their secret from prying eyes and ears. Marta, clearly disturbed by this need for secrecy, had an intense emotional connection with Pablo, although the full details of this connection remained hidden. As they continued, one particular image captured everyone's attention. It was a portrait of Pablo's mother, Patricia, which, to everyone's surprise, also included Marta and Esteban. Even more intriguing was the caption identifying them as uncle and aunt. This revelation shocked the group, especially Lupe, who, confused and anxious, confronted her parents, Marta and Esteban, demanding an explanation for the use of these familial terms by Pablo. At that moment, it became clear that there was a deeper familial relationship, revealing that Pablo was, in fact, Lupe's cousin. The pressure of the secret became unbearable, and Marta, under the weight of the truth she carried, could no longer hold back. She revealed the harsh reality. Patricia, Pablo's mother, was actually her biological sister. Patricia had been facing severe mental health challenges since her youth, a situation so grave that it led her father to make the painful decision to have her committed to a mental institution. Over time, Patricia began to recover, but during her stay, someone took advantage of her vulnerable state, leading to her pregnancy. Pablo was born in the asylum, carrying a unique birthmark on his hand that distinguished him from birth. The situation became complicated when the doctor in charge of the asylum approached Marta and Esteban, asking them to take care of the little boy. However, both felt unable to take in a child that was the product of such a dramatic context. Marta, in a gesture of renunciation, instructed the nurse to let Pablo remain in the asylum, effectively abandoning him to his fate. This act of rejection from Marta and Esteban left Pablo at the mercy of a desolate and indifferent environment, planting the seeds of a revenge that would grow with him. Marta's revelations left the group completely horrified. With time running out, they were faced with a macabre decision. They needed to choose someone to sacrifice, or everyone would face a fatal fate. Faced with Marta's dark confession, the decision was unanimous against her. In a last desperate effort to save herself, Marta approached Teresa, pleading for her to reconsider her vote. With tears in her eyes, Marta exposed the financial precariousness that Teresa and her only child were facing, promising that if Teresa accepted the sacrifice in her place, she would ensure a financially secure future for Teresa's child, allowing him to live the life of his dreams. However, despite Marta's anguished pleas, Teresa remained resolute. Firmly, she refused to change her choice, reiterating that no promise of wealth would persuade her to give up her own life. After the votes were cast, the cruel reality fell upon Marta, who found herself with no alternatives. With courage, she acknowledged her past mistakes and decided to face the consequences of her actions. She walked towards the gate, knelt, and mentally prepared for the sacrifice, hoping her death might somehow redeem the others. However, as she resigned herself, the timer counting down the seconds to her end stopped, and the doors opened, revealing a banquet filled with delicacies and drinks awaiting them. The group, confused but visibly relieved, assumes that Pablo, whom they believe to be behind all of this, has decided to forgive them. They begin to celebrate what seems to be the end of their nightmare. During the banquet, the inspector shares a disturbing theory. The elderly man who died at the beginning could be Pablo's father, and possibly responsible for the abuse that led to Patricia's pregnancy, a cruel key to the current events. The theory is barely processed when the inspector, attempting to serve himself, cuts his finger on a large knife hidden among the food. Fear returns as the timer restarts, and a message etched on the knife declares that the chosen person must now be executed with that same knife. In a desperate act, the doctor, panicked to preserve his own life, advances toward Marta with the knife in hand. To protect her, Esteban intervenes and in an extreme gesture stabs the doctor, believing he was already condemned. With the doctor severely injured, the group tries to convince him to accept his inevitable end, explaining that if he does not, another innocent will suffer. Tormented and remembering the harm he caused Pablo's mother, the doctor agrees. He requests a new vote, which without hesitation falls upon him. Resigned, he hands the knife to the inspector and asks him to end his life in the same tragic manner as Patricia's. The doctor dies similarly to Pablo's mother, with a fatal blow. With the timer reset, the door finally opens and everyone rushes outside, only to face one last obstacle, a complex labyrinth. At the end of the path, the same shooters who had previously pursued them are waiting. The only escape is to navigate through the labyrinth and reach the coast where a boat awaits, promising freedom from the island. With urgency, they begin the race for survival. Esteban and his family stay together while Inspector Simon and Teresa take different paths, running separately through the labyrinth. Teresa is quick and manages to climb up and spot the puzzle's exit first. She runs through it, heading for freedom, but as she reaches the other side, she is suddenly hit by a car. This moment reveals the biggest twist in the story. The driver who ran over Teresa is none other than Inspector Simon, who turns out to be the real Pablo. Pablo had been playing the game next to them, watching everyone suffer for what they had done to him and his mother. Teresa, wounded and in shock, pleads with Pablo for mercy, begging him to spare her life. But Pablo shows no forgiveness. He coldly runs over Teresa with the car, just as she had done with his mother, Patricia. Esteban and his family finally reach the coast and rush to board the boat, desperate to escape the island. Just as they are about to leave, Pablo arrives, believing he is still the inspector. They stop and let him board. As they prepare to sail, Pablo starts helping them with the boat, but Marta suddenly notices a familiar birthmark on his hand. The terrible truth is revealed. This is not Simon, the inspector. It is Pablo, the true mastermind behind everything. Pablo immediately turns against them, pulling out a gun. He tells them there is one last game to be played. He hands Esteban and Marta a gun with only one bullet in the chamber and tells them they must take turns pointing the gun at each other's heads and pulling the trigger. When the bullet fires, one of them will die, but if they refuse to play, he will shoot their daughter, Lupe. Terrified and with no other choice, Esteban and Marta begin to play the twisted game. Marta, trembling and struggling with her emotions, aims the gun at Esteban but hesitates, feeling her inner conflict. Pablo coldly reveals more secrets. He tells Marta that her husband had numerous affairs and that his betrayals did not stop there. He even crossed boundaries with their daughter, Lupe. Shocked, Marta turns to her daughter, seeking the truth. Lupe, with tears in her eyes, confirms Pablo's words, admitting that her father's actions were real. Esteban had not only betrayed Marta, but had also abused their daughter Lupe. According to Pablo, Esteban really did not deserve to continue living. Even aware of this, Marta found herself unable to pull the trigger. As the tension grew, two shooters suddenly appeared, but Lupe quickly reassured them, indicating that intervention was not necessary, and they backed off. It was at this moment that Marta and Esteban realized that Lupe had been on Pablo's side all along. With an air of revelation, Lupe confessed to feeling suffocated and imprisoned in her own home, where Esteban continually abused her. She had tried several times to open up to Marta, but never found the necessary support. Filled with bitterness and pain, Lupe explained that she had allied with Pablo to orchestrate her revenge. Without hesitation, Pablo took the weapon from Marta's hands and executed Esteban, glaring at Marta with severity as he declared that she would also face the consequences of her negligence. As punishment, he sentenced her to the same asylum where her mother, Patricia, was tortured for years with electric shock treatments. With Esteban eliminated and Marta suffering the penalties for her inaction, Pablo and Lupe achieved the revenge they had so long sought. They set off to start their lives anew, their dark mission accomplished.